Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's training. What we're going to do is lead today's training to help prepare you to take on the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Initiative. Now, the first order of business up in the top right-hand corner is the login area. This is how registered users log into the system. So if I'm an employer, if I'm an individual, we all begin and access our information, our profile information, by entering our username and password. However, there probably are going to be a number of people who are new to the system, and so they're not going to rely on entering their username and password to start. Instead, they're going to be looking at this button that I'm now hovering over in the lower left portion of the screen, that it invites individuals to file a PUA claim. This button that I'm now hovering over is going to play a very important role for those customers who wish to submit their initial PUA claim. I'm going to actually click that in just a moment and show you exactly how it works. There is a claimant guide, a PUA claimant guide, to provide assistance to your customers. This is the fastest and easiest way for them to access that guide so they can literally have some assistance as they provide data entry to submit their claim. So let's go ahead and click Individuals File a PUA Claim. Okay, you will notice that by design, you still have access as an individual to the left navigation panel. So what you'll notice is here towards the top of the list, it's a bullet item list of all of the scenarios that will more than likely be covered under the PUA Relief Initiative. And then conversely, there are two examples of scenarios that may not necessarily be covered under the PUA Relief Initiative. So this is good information to be aware of if you're not already, and certainly it will be helpful to your customers. So to continue the process, we're going to click on the next button to proceed. And that brings us to the starting screen, which is where the system is going to prompt the user to enter their social security number. What I'm going to do is present a scenario that hopefully is pretty manageable, pretty easy to follow. What I'm going to suggest in this scenario is that this person is a hairstylist who works in a local salon. And unfortunately, they've been out of work due to the quarantine. So for some time now, they've been waiting to have an opportunity. And now that the PUA initiative is in full swing, the person is going to come in and exercise this opportunity to file their initial claim because they've been out of work since the middle of April. And here it is, it's going on past a month already. So we have a lot of opportunity to make up for lost time. So to start, we're going to go ahead and enter the individual's social security number and re-enter it. Okay. Now, one of the things the system is going to do is it's going to look at the social security number to see if the customer has an existing account, and it's also going to see if the customer has an existing claim. So that's kind of important to know because there's a lot going on behind the scenes beyond the pages of information that we're going to look at, and this is a very important consideration. So once the data entry is complete, the customer is going to click Next. What you'll notice is that the progress bar has already changed in just that very first screen. That very first screen was used to determine eligibility, and that was based on social security number check. So that is completed, and now we're looking at registration information. That's the next step in this process. Basically, the individual is going to enter a username that they are going to employ every time they want to log into the system, and they're also going to create a password to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Now watch the wording as I continue to type. You'll notice that there is a convention here that is determining whether I'm entering a strong password. Strong passwords are definitely the way to go because they're more complex. Now we're going to choose a security question, and this is used primarily in those instances where the user has simply forgotten their login credentials and they need a retrieval process to use them. So the security question could potentially be one of those presented so that the system can try to identify whether the person is truly who they say they are. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that security question and enter my answer. And now I move on to my primary location information section. I'm going to go ahead and enter the zip code for the individual. Lastly, the customer is going to indicate whether they are authorized to work in the United States. Clicking No is going to present the display of this little pop-up alert to kind of remind them about eligibility requirements. Just wanted to point that out to you. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the yes route on this one. Okay, the next one is the email address of the customer. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that right now. And I have to enter it again to confirm it. Now, if you're concerned that there are customers who need assistance but don't have a current email account, not a problem. We have a hyperlink right here where if they click on it, you'll see a window pop open and they can actually choose to make one right here on the fly. They can choose from any of these free email providers. And then basically when that process is done, they can come right back to this page and they can go ahead and enter their email address. The last part of the screen is for demographic information. So we're going to enter her date of birth. And when you enter the date of birth and click someplace outside of the text box, you'll notice the system is going to go ahead and calculate their age. Next is their gender. And now I'm going to take a real quick look just to make sure that all the required items are complete. And it looks pretty good. So now the moment of truth. Alrighty, so we're still in the registration process. We're going to be here for a while. There are multiple screens of data entry that we must fulfill. But in this case, the customer is going to enter their first and last name. And then we're going to click Next. Okay, now we're going to enter residential address information to kind of help this along. And you'll notice that the information is pre-filled based on the zip code that I entered on the previous screen. So from here, I'm simply going to go ahead and enter her residential address. And then similarly, I'm going to enter the mailing address, which I could take a shortcut and simply click this checkbox. And we'll click Next to save that information and move on. Phone numbers, going to go ahead and put those in right now. Just make one up. And then next, we have to indicate what phone type this is. Now there are additional fields, but you'll notice that none of them have a red asterisk, so none of them are required at this time. Let's click Next. Okay, so the preferred method of notification. This is very helpful here. Please be aware that we are going to rely on U.S. mail to generate and send paper notices in many, many instances. But there also is the availability of electronic distribution to speed up or expedite this process. So these are the options available. I'm going to go ahead and choose the last one here to kind of cover the bases so that I not only will get an internal message if I'm logged into the system, but I'll also receive an email notification if I'm not logged into the system. All right, so this is a required item. I'm going to skip it on purpose just to remind you what it looks like here in the PUA world when a customer or staff, for that matter, makes a mistake. And hopefully you're used to seeing this. Here is your red text kind of blowing the horn saying, wait, you have to enter that field. And here is your red exclamation mark. So I will comply. I'll go ahead and choose one of the options displayed in this list. And now I'll try to save the page again. All right, moving right along. Now it's citizenship. These are the standard options that I presume you're used to seeing. Citizen of the U.S. or U.S. territory is what I will select in this scenario, but be aware that there are some others here as well. So if they are a U.S. permanent resident, if they are an alien or refugee lawfully admitted to the U.S., or if they're a citizen of freely associated states, in each of these three instances, if they do make that selection, Notice the page is going to refresh and prompt the user to enter their alien number. For now, I'm going to stick with the first option. Next is disability information, and the system is prompting the user if they want to disclose their disability. If they select yes, this is an example of what we call a trigger item. It's going to trigger the display of additional information. And by the way, as we go through this process, I'm going to point these items out to you so that you can be aware of what happens when the customer selects a yes versus a no response. So that's what happens if they select yes. I'm going to keep it simple and just say, no, I do not have a disability. And the next and final item on this particular screen prompts the user to ask, do you make or owe child support payments? Now, if they click yes, there is additional information that's shown on this page. And so they would be prompted then to complete this information conditionally. So I'm just going to keep it up on the screen for a moment here so you can kind of get a look at it and become familiar with what's being shown. And in my instance, I'm going to go ahead and select no just to kind of simplify the scenario. But please understand that if they are going to request child support deductions from their weekly benefit amounts, it kind of is going to alter the actual amount they receive, but that is going to be covered so they can maintain child support through their PUA assistance. All right, going to go ahead and click the next button to save the data and move on to the next step. Prompts for education information. So the first of these is an opportunity for the customer to indicate their highest education level achieved. This is a standard lookup table. So I'm going to indicate that she has a high school diploma. And the follow-up to that is to indicate whether the customer is currently attending school. And I'm going to suggest that no, Marie is not in school. And click next. All right, now we're going to walk into the realm of employment information to capture some more information. The first of these is to determine the customer's current employment status. And remember, she was laid off in the middle of April 15th, tax day of all days. That was her last day worked. So no, she is currently not working at this time. The type of business that Marie worked in was a salon. That would be considered a private business, but there are other options for other scenarios. Marie, are you currently looking for work? Do you have any related licenses or certifications? I'm going to go ahead and say yes because she is a licensed cosmetologist. So I'm going to go ahead and play that out to show you what it looks like. Next is, within the last 12 months, have you received a notice of termination or layoff from your job, or received documentation that you are separating from military service? I'm going to go ahead and indicate in this scenario yes, because there was a formal declaration that she cannot come to work due to the quarantine. Now, your policy may regard this a little bit differently, but the good news is whether you choose yes or no at this time, there's going to be additional data entry performed to ensure that the situation is well documented. But do understand that by clicking yes, that prompts the display of another item, which is required conditionally. So I'm going to go ahead and enter her last day worked, which was April 15th in my scenario. Next is farm worker information, and you may be wondering, well, what does that have to do with the PUA claim? So be aware that if the user does click yes, they will be prompted conditionally to provide additional data. If the scenario does not apply to the customer, then we'll simply keep it at no, and then move on. All right, so now I have a step that not everybody's going to see, because on the previous screen, I indicated that yes, I do have a license or certificate. So now I'm being prompted to tell the system what that is. Now, I have not done that previously, so there's nothing in the table. So I'm going to click to add new information. Alrighty, so here is the data entry portion of the screen. I can't type today. There we go, cosmetology license. Issuing organization, Guam, state of. The date upon which she completed and received received and completed may not necessarily be the same date, so we'll stick with the date that she completed it. And notice what happened there. I was so used to entering date in month, date, year format, the system's saying, oh no, Charlie, that's not what we want. We want just 2 digits for the month and 4 digits for the year. So the system actually corrected my data input for me. None of the following items are required, so I'm going to leave them alone. Take a last look to make sure it's complete, and it looks to be. So I'm going to click Save. And I now have properly documented my occupational license or certificate. All right, I don't have any more to enter, so I'm going to hit the next button to move on. If you're keeping score at home, notice that we're still in the registration process of this procedure. So for employment status, the system is asking Marie that if she were offered a job today, would she accept it? Oh, absolutely. But if she answers no, be aware that there conditionally will be additional items for her to consider. And she would have to provide a reason that she would not be able to accept work right away. But I'm going to go ahead and keep this a happy scenario and say, yes, she's ready to work. She is able and available. Key concept in the UI world. Marie, are you self-employed or owner of a business, farm, or fishing operation? If you select yes, there's no additional prompts, but that is not Marie's scenario, so I'll select no. Neither is she an elected official. So again, just showing you that by clicking yes, there's nothing else displayed. And my final answer is no, she is not an elected official. Now we're stepping into the part of the scenario and part of the data entry process where we really begin to hone in on why we're here. And that's because there has been a major disaster declared, and that is the prompt for the unemployment insurance or unemployment compensation, whichever you prefer, that will be provided to these customers. So the system asks, are you unemployed as a direct result of a pandemic or major disaster? I'm definitely going to click yes. However, if they do select the no radio button, notice that the system is going to say, are you sure you don't want to apply for PUA? So yes, I am going to apply. I am going to select yes. And now I have to identify the state in which I was affected. What we did for convenience is we put you right to the top of the list. So that's where you can expect to find it. Now, declare what the major disaster was. COVID-19. As a result of that data entry, the system has expanded the page so that the customer can provide additional information. The starting point is the self-certification question, and it asks, are you self-employed? Are you a business owner? Are you a gig worker? Or are you a worker for a religious organization whose unemployment was a direct result of COVID-19? Now, gig worker, that's new lingo for a lot of us, okay? And essentially what we're talking about when we mention gig worker is an independent contractor of some sort, or maybe they work on an online platform, or they are contract firm workers, they're on-call workers, temporary workers. Essentially, they're kind of working under some kind of a formal agreement with on-demand companies, and they provide services to the company's clients. So that's the best I can do in terms of what a gig worker is. So if Marie fit that scenario, she would choose yes. And if she were to choose the yes button, just wanted to give you a sneak peek on what she would be expected to provide. As a gig worker, she would have to tell the system whether she was the owner or sole proprietor of a business. And she would also have to enter her earnings for each calendar of the 2019 year. All right, so that's what would happen if she were to indicate, yes, I fall into one of these employment categories. But remember, Marie works for a salon that was closed due to the quarantine that was confirmed. So that would probably not be the best scenario for her by clicking yes. So when Marie clicks the no radio button, it does change the remaining questions, and these are also going to flex and change based on her responses. So, did your employer offer you the ability to telework? If yes, you'd select the yes radio button, and you'll notice that there is now a subsequent question about pay and hours. However, you can't telework and take care of people's hair and make them look wonderful. So no, teleworking was not an option through the employer. Is Marie receiving sick leave pay or some other paid leave benefit that equals her normal pay? If yes, she would select the yes radio button, and then she would have to provide additional information in terms of when that payment date ends. But in my instance, I'm going to indicate that no, she is not receiving additional pay that is equal to her normal pay. We're going to enter the last day of her actual work. And folks, this is the actual item I was referring to about 3 or 4 screens ago when I first indicated my last day worked, or in that instance, when was I notified that I was becoming unemployed. So if you did not answer yes for that former question, you still have the opportunity to enter it here, so hope is not lost. Did you quit your job because of COVID-19? Nope, not in my scenario. I had to stop coming to work because of the quarantine. I didn't quit. So I would select no in that scenario. Are you laid off due to a lack of work after a business closure caused by COVID-19? Yeah, now we're talking. That is indeed my scenario. Do you have an expected return to work date? If yes, click it, and you probably, some part along the line, will have an opportunity to provide a date. But in my scenario, or I should say in Marie's scenario, she doesn't know yet. Her employer hasn't contacted her and prepared her in terms of when she can expect to return to work. Were you to start working but was unable to due to the closure of the business caused by COVID-19? No, that doesn't fit Marie's scenario either, so I'm going to click no. She's been working there for well over a year. Did you do any type of non-W-2 or self-employed work within the last 18 months? So I think you can kind of see the pattern of questions that are being asked here. Part of what we're looking at and part of what the system is trying to figure out is if there are additional sources of income that Marie can potentially declare. And I'm going to go ahead and keep this on a fairly simple note and indicate that no, that is not indeed the case. Now, the last step on this particular screen is an acknowledgement. The customer acknowledges that they understand that making the certification is under penalty of perjury, so don't lie. You don't want to get in trouble for fraud. So they have to select the button that says, yes, I understand, I acknowledge that. And now they should be able to save their data entry by clicking next. So the desired job title is the next prompt for the user. And essentially, they're going to be looking at their current job title. I presume that they would want to stay within the same occupation. So a couple of things the customer can do. She can type the word cosmetologist, and if you see it here in the list, the objective is to click it and select it. Because what you do up here is going to affect what you do in the next section called job occupation. So because of that selection, when I click the drop-down arrow, I now can choose actual titles that are suggested occupations related to what I previously selected. And when you see this bold font style being displayed, It's kind of like unofficial confirmation that the system was able to successfully connect with what we call the ONET system or the ONET database. That's kind of a national standard for occupational terms and occupational descriptions. Now, there are going to be instances where the customer's occupational title is rather unique, and maybe they cannot automatically arrive at it the way I did. So in those instances, they can click to search for an occupation and manually select it. But for now, it looks like I'm pretty squared away, so I'm going to go ahead and click Next. All right, we're still in the category called registration, or at least the registration process of this procedure. So here is where we're being prompted for our ethnic origin information. And remember, whenever you see checkboxes, that means the user can make more than one selection. Okay, military service information. This is the standard part of your system before PUA, the PUA module was turned on and activated. So this is an opportunity for Marie and others like her to indicate their military service qualifications. The lead question is very important. Are you currently in the military, a veteran, or the spouse of a veteran? If the user clicks the Yes button, it's going to trigger the display of additional information. Essentially, these 4 questions, because they were not there just a moment ago. I'm going to totally simplify this process because guess what? Marie is not a veteran, and she is not the spouse of a veteran, nor is she currently in the military. So I'm going to go back to square one and select the No button, and I'm going to continue to select No for each of these additional questions. And now I'm going to save that by clicking Next. Okay, payment information is the next option here on our stop, and there are currently 2 options in place. The customer can indicate whether they'd like a direct deposit made for their weekly benefit amount, or if they would like to receive a paper check. So here's what happens if they select direct deposit. It's going to trigger additional information to be entered, including the routing transit number from her bank or financial institution. Now, this is the real deal, folks. I can't put in make-believe information here because the system is going to catch me when I try to save the page. So I'm simply pointing this out to you in terms of what you can expect, but I'm going to take the other route because I don't have valid routing information to enter. Now, if the customer does click to select paper check, notice the pop-up alert that's now displayed. It basically encourages the user to select direct deposit so that the money they receive is going to get to them faster. Excuse me. They can enter additional comments and clarifications on this page. Maybe there's something they entered previously that they're not 100% solid about. So maybe they can use this particular text box to justify why they answered a question the way they did. Lastly, payment deductions. Okay, for federal tax withholdings, would you like that to be done from your weekly benefit amounts? It's going to be approximately 10% of the WBA. So if they want to do that now, they can click yes. If they select no, there's going to be another alert that says, don't forget, you're going to have to account for this when it comes tax time. So they can change these decisions later on in the process if they desire. They're not locked into it at this point, so maybe that's good information to know. All right, looks like I'm done, and now I'm going to click Next. All right, we're so close to being finished with the registration portion of this process. When we come to this screen, and the section of which is called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance heading, this basically is an option to the customer deciding, or depending rather, on what they want to do and where they want to go next. Technically, the information that they have entered is sufficient to satisfy the data entry requirements for registration purposes. So if they want to take a break and go away, maybe there's something they have to take care of now and they don't have the time to finish that, not a problem. They can log back into the system with their username and password that they created way back on step 2, and they can essentially pick up where they left off from. However, we're going to go ahead and complete this together, so I am going to click Next so that I can continue. Alrighty, I think this is called progress in some parts of the world. We're 2 categories down and 3 more to go. So now the focus of our data entry is on work history information. Now you'll notice on this screen at the top part is the employment history, and if the customer had previously reported any using this site, the information would be displayed here. But remember, this is the very first time that Marie is entering the system, so there is no such data to share or show. So now below in the area called Additional Employment History, the question presented reads, are there any other employment history items that you would like to add? Oh, absolutely. I have to provide the name of my salon and the other information so that I can correctly and accurately finish my claim. So I'm going to choose the Yes button and click Next to continue. All right, so now as a condition of selecting that, the system is going to prompt me to enter my employer information. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the salon information that I was working with. I'm going to enter the address, zip code. Remember, we still have a shortcut here. So if you enter the zip code and click outside the text box, the system is normally going to enter the corresponding city, state, and country name. So if you like shortcuts, remember that one. Now I'm entering the phone number of the salon, and it looks like the top part is complete. So now for the middle part. Is this your last employer? This is going to trigger the system to prompt for the display of additional employment history if it is in accordance with the scenario. Now for mine, I'm going to go ahead and keep it where yes, this is the last employer because it's the only one that Marie has been working for well over a year now. So I'm going to indicate yes, this is my last employer. I do not intend to add additional histories. Is this employer considered a temporary agency? Yes or no? And finally, what is the name of the employer that is shown on Marie's check stubs? Okay, so once again, we're going to be prompted for the job title. And even though it sounds repetitive, you have to keep in mind that there are so many different scenarios that potentially can be addressed here. Mine just happens to be fairly simple in that it's a single employer. But there will likely be other scenarios where customers maybe worked for several and had several job titles. So this time, instead of typing in the word cosmetologist, I'm going to show you an alternate way by typing in hairstylist. Remember that if you see it displayed as you're typing it, go ahead and click it, because that's what brings us to the next part, suggested occupational titles. And there it is. And once again, we get that bold font, so we know that we successfully made contact with the ONET database. And don't forget, they can always manually do an occupation search if what they're trying to find is not being shown to them. Now we talk about the position itself, whether it was regular employment, seasonal employment, etc. Was it a full or a part-time job? How many hours per week did Marie normally work? I'm going to suggest that she used to work 4 days a week, 8-hour shifts, 32 hours a week. Now, if she had partial hours, like 32.5 hours, for example, she can indicate that if necessary. Okay, so the next step is for Marie to indicate how much money she made, and then define the actual salary unit. So I'm going to indicate that she was making about $400 a week, which works out to be close to 10 bucks an hour, and indicate whether the salary is commission-based, yes or no. Next, Marie's going to indicate the day upon which she began working for c.a.r.e.s salon. I'm going to say back in October of 2019. And when I click outside that text box, the system is going to display this red text for summary purposes. Is Marie currently working there for c.a.r.e.s salon? No, she is not. And this week, what were her gross earnings? Well, c.a.r.e.'s not been working since the 15th of April, so 0 is actually an acceptable entry. We do not have a separation reason from the employer. That's why it says not yet submitted. And now we're going to indicate why she is no longer working for the salon. And because of the PUA module, you will notice that right up on top, more than likely it's because of a disaster or pandemic that caused a lack of work. So that's the best scenario, or the best choice, I should say, in my scenario, but there are others that might potentially work. These are usually associated with what we call regular UI claims. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the one specifically for the pandemic. And last day work, just in case you forgot. There you go. So when the user enters that date and then clicks outside the field, you'll notice that the system is going to go ahead and calculate the appropriate duration. And I'm glad it did that because I made a mistake. She's been there more than 6 months. She's been there more like 1.5 years. And that's because I made a mistake here on the date she began working field. I meant to enter 2018, not 2019. So when I re-enter that data and click outside, that's what I was expecting to see. That's a little bit more in line with my scenario. All right, some additional questions here. Does the employer intend to recall you within 6 weeks? If yes, well, what is that anticipated recall date? If not, keep it at no. Were you separated from the job because you had family responsibilities that you had to attend to? Yes or no? Was this employment with an educational institution? Yes or no? Are you a corporate officer or a relative of a corporate officer? Yes or no? And finally, were you separated from this job because of lack of transportation? So you'll notice that in each of those instances, selecting yes does not trigger the display of additional information. So we're kind of back now to the occupational title that we had previously indicated. So now we're being prompted to enter a description of the occupation. And all we have to do is to click Insert Occupational Description. Now, if we want to free text enter the information, we certainly can. But I'm going to go ahead and take a shortcut for this demonstration. I'm going to slide down to the bottom of the window and I'm going to click Submit, and that's how the information gets input into the text box. All right, some additional questions. Okay, these are obviously going to be working towards whether Marie is eligible to receive the entirety of the weekly benefit amount. Or are there other forms of income and revenue that she's receiving that could potentially offset or reduce that amount? So in each of these instances, if she indicates yes for a pension or retirement benefit, yes for 401k, those are going to trigger the display of additional information to be completed. However, the last one here for military service, you'll notice that is not going to trigger any more info. And in my scenario, I'm going to go ahead and keep it at no all the way down. Again, I was just kind of showing you what you can expect if those situations do apply. And likewise with workers' compensation. Okay, yes, she was receiving, or no, she was not. All right, now that's the most extensive step. There's a lot of data entry going on, so it's easy for somebody to make a mistake. That's where business rules come into play. So when we click the Save button, we're going to see if we made any mistakes. And this is looking pretty good. I don't see any red text glaring at me. I don't see any red exclamation marks. So the fact that we have now an employment history table that previously was not there, I would say this is progress. This is good. Now keep in mind a couple things here, all right? You'll notice that there are opportunities to edit or change the info. Maybe there's something you're seeing that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's the wrong start date, you know, kind of like what I experienced. So you can go back in and you can make changes. You'll also notice that there is, by default, last employer automatically selected. Now, if the customer needs to go back in because they just remembered, oh, wait a minute, I did work for a couple of months for so-and-so. And so if they do select yes, there are additional history items I have to enter. Then when this table gets updated based on those additional entries, the user is going to have to make a choice as to which is the last employer. That should be system set based on the dates, but if the dates kind of fall on top of each other, the user may want to make that selection themselves if there's multiple records. But in my case, no need, okay? Because we're talking about just one employer over the course of this pandemic. So I'm going to select no, I don't want to make additional entries, and click next. Alrighty, we're so close to finishing up the work history section and moving on to the certification section of this process. So here is a prompt asking the user if you want to take a quick timeout, and if you want to look at the information that you've assembled so far, you can go ahead and click Review My Claim. But I'm going to show you at the end of this process that there is a similar feature that allows the user to investigate or review what they entered. So I'm going to go ahead and do it at that point, not now. Okay, almost there. We're now in the certification process. And in so doing, the customer has to look at and review this very important agreement. They have to certify that all the information they submitted is true, that they're going to be reading the PUA handbook to be aware of and understand their rights and what the requirements are for this program. And they also want to acknowledge that if they did make any false statements, they can get in some real deep trouble. So maybe they want to take a time out. Maybe they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe I don't want to push this through just yet. So if they want to, they can ultimately take a time out and suggest, no, I do not want to file this claim. Maybe something's come up, but we've come too far, folks. I'm not going to go down that path. I don't want to come back some other time and re-enter information and re-answer questions if I need to. So instead, I'm going to choose that, yes, I, Marie Callender, I do want to file this claim. And they're going to click next. All right, so here is now a list of the provisions that the customer must be aware of. So they are going to click each and every checkbox for each of these statements to indicate that they have read the statement and understand what the requirements are. So they have to file weekly certifications. They must report earnings. If they start back to work and if they're making more than this allotted amount of money, they must stop filing the weekly certifications because they have essentially earned more than the weekly benefit amount. Now here, currently in place, there is an initiative for work thresholds, okay, for work search thresholds, I think is more appropriate. If you move, please give us a change of address immediately. Know that you're going to receive important notices from the state regarding your claim. And also understand that if you do select paper check, which is what I did select, that could potentially be a little slower in terms of direct deposits being a much faster way to receive their money. Lastly, I'm going to certify that I have provided truthful and accurate information to the best of my ability. And now for the moment of truth, we click on the next button. All right, well, that was a bit of false alarm. It wasn't like the truly last step, although this step that we're looking at now is very important because by law, the customer has to know what their benefits rights are. So the first way that they can learn about this is by clicking this hyperlink to essentially review the handbook. So the next item that they will have to look at is their rights and responsibilities. It's a continuation. They can either print now the benefit rights information document or choose to do it later. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to choose later and save my response. You can click the pause button. It's still processing my request, but you just won't go dizzy looking at it spin and spin and spin if you don't want to. Hooray! This is the screen that your customers definitely want to see. It's confirmation that they have successfully filed their PUA claim. Congratulations, okay? So on this screen, besides the confirmation that it was done successfully, there are several acknowledgments that are shown to you as well. And essentially, it's a repeat of what we saw 2 screens ago, where the customer had to click each of the checkboxes that precedes each of these statements. So I'm not going to go ahead and reread them to you again, but I am going to click the next button so we can finish this off. I believe there's one final screen, and that really was it, because now the process is complete. The fact that the customer is now here under their individual workspace. And hey, I even get a custom introduction. Hello, Marie Callender, and welcome. This is where we want to be. This is what the customer wants to see as a successful conclusion to that process. And each of these little squares, I'm sure you're familiar with them. You've seen them on the workforce side of the house. They're called widgets. Now, in addition to that, these widgets also provide another very helpful service. And specifically, I'm referring to this one over here called the Unemployment Services widget. You'll notice that there are some hyperlinks that are displayed here. So I'm going to go ahead and work off of the widget to select the File for Weekly Benefits hyperlink. And we have a couple of on-screen prompts to provide some assistance to the user. And essentially, this big old button right here, that's what we're going to use to start the process. If this were a work in progress, in other words, if the customer had formerly submitted weekly certifications, you can see the information down here in this table, but we haven't done that, so there's nothing to show. So let's go ahead and get the process started. We're going to click on this button to file my weekly certification to continue my PUA claim. And we also have a fairly detailed explanation here of the weekly certification process. So the first step in the process for the weekly certs, read the information, understand it, own it, and again, you have some critical days here to be aware of so that you don't misstep and drop the ball. So we're going to step up and we're going to click the next button. Alrighty, so here we're still in the explanation phase of this process. It's a really good idea to read and digest the information and then certify essentially by clicking the checkbox to determine that yes, I am indeed the person listed on this PUA claim. I've read and I do understand the information. I definitely do not want to commit fraud knowingly. So we're going to click next to continue. All right, so now we're going to review some of the information that was previously submitted. So this is an opportunity to review and edit if necessary. So contact information is the first way to start. Nothing to change there, so I'll simply click next and move on. And yay, success. We have moved on to a new category process, which is eligibility selected areas or selected pieces of information. So the first of these is major disaster information, and the information presented enables the customer to identify how specifically the COVID-19 pandemic related to or caused their unemployment status. So here are a series of radio buttons that you can choose from. I'll go ahead and keep them here so you can kind of read them and digest them. There's a lot to look at. And I'll go ahead and move the list down just a little bit more. And a few more. I'm going to keep the scenario going. You stopped working because you were unable to reach your place of work after a public official's required quarantine. I'm going to stick with that because that is still indeed the same situation or scenario or reason that I had previously selected, and there's no change in that. Okay, so that's my scenario and I'm sticking to it. So after making that selection, now there's an acknowledgement that once again, under perjury or under penalty of perjury, I acknowledge that information that I am presenting is truthful, factual, to the best of my abilities. Otherwise, I could get in deep trouble. So yes, I certainly understand. So I'm going to make those selections and save them by clicking Next. All right, now we're going to have a series of questions that are aimed directly at the customer, him or herself. And it kind of gets personal because we're directly addressing the individual. So Marie, other than for reasons that were the direct result of the disaster or pandemic, were you able and available? Okay, this is a huge concept in the UI world. You know, customers have to be able to pick up work again. And so this is the leading question that attempts to confirm that understanding. Were you able and available to go to work during the week beginning Sunday, April 12th, ending Saturday, April 18th? Now, these dates are being presented to me, Marie, because of the date I last worked, which was April 15th. That falls in the middle of this benefit week, and that's why you're seeing these dates as bumpers. Always begins on a Sunday, ends on the following Saturday. I was indeed able and available. So I'm going to select that, and there is some additional information here to make sure that Marie is fully aware of the repercussions that could result if she answers in a fraudulent way. So we're going to save that by clicking Next. The next one, for workers' compensation. Did you receive or apply for workers' compensation during that same week? No, I did not. Next. Did you receive or apply for private income protection for loss of wages, including illness or disability, during that same week beginning Sunday, April 12th, ending Saturday, April 18th? No, I did not. Supplemental unemployment benefit. Did you receive a supplemental unemployment benefit pursuant to a collective bargaining agreement? No, I did not. In terms of pension and allowance, did you begin receiving a Veterans Administration allowance, an employer pension, or any other pension, excluding Social Security benefits, during that same week? Now, just to be devil's advocate, notice that if the customer does provide a yes response, more than likely there is going to be a conditionally required item that they must complete. But in my scenario, this does not apply to Marie's situation, so I instead am going to select no and save the entry by clicking Next. In terms of her status as still being unemployed, Marie, were you still unemployed as a direct result of the disaster or pandemic during that week beginning April 12th and ending April 18th? Yes. And saving it by clicking Next. Job offers that potentially you refused, and now we are into new categories. We are beyond job contacts. We're now in the section called job offers. Marie, did you refuse any job offers during that same week? No, I did not, because I didn't receive any. So again, there's some qualifying information down below to kind of help explain to Marie that this is a very serious response. And I click Next to save it. Earnings through your work activity. Marie, did you work full or part-time or earn wages during the week beginning Sunday, April 12th and ending Saturday, April 18th? Now you got to be careful here because people tend to get into a pattern of no, next, etc. Don't fall into that pattern. You know, if you have an opportunity to work with your customers, I would highly recommend that they really take their time and read what's being presented. And here's why. If you remember my scenario, the last day that she was worked, the day upon which she became unemployed, it was April 15th. That's right in the middle of this period. So technically, she did work, even though it wasn't her full work schedule, and technically she did earn wages, even if she didn't receive them yet. And that's why there's this bullet point statement here. She still has to report them. So this would be a yes response based on my scenario. And now that I have selected that and I save that response, I have a little bit of work that I'm going to ultimately have to provide for. Okay, so now we're going to focus on earnings and employer information. Marie, please select the employer that you worked for during this week that began on the 12th and ended on the 18th. And luckily, there it is, c.a.r.e.s Salon. That does indeed match the employment record that I entered manually. You'll notice that here, please check the checkbox if the employer that you worked for is for whatever reason not on that list I just displayed. So we don't want to select that. I do want to select c.a.r.e.s Salon, and then now I can save the entry by clicking Next. So now we're going to roll into the employer information. Some of it's going to be pre-existing, and other information I'm going to have to manually enter because it was not formally or previously requested. So the employer information, c.a.r.e.s Salon, it's still the same, nothing to do there. But now I have to provide contact information. So the person that the state can contact to confirm this information, how can they be contacted? I'll select by phone. Contact title, this is the salon owner. Person's name and her last name. And the phone number. Now you'll notice that none of these has a red asterisk here. That's because these are what we call conditionally required. It depends on the selection that was made initially in terms of the initial contact method, and that's what's going to drive the information that follows. So once again, we have to provide the job title that we were working as. She can either be a hairstylist or she can be a cosmetologist. So I'm going to go with the hairstylist route. Because I entered it there, I can see it here, and I'm going to select it. And that's what presents in bold the occupational title and code from the ONET database. Once again, if the title that you're looking at is very unique and it cannot be retrieved automatically, then manually the customer can search for and select the desired occupational title. Hired information. Is this a permanent position with this employer? Yeah, it sure was before April 15th. What's your salary and salary type? Again, I was earning approximately $400 a week. And that is going to be calculated by the system as being approximately $10 an hour. So now we get into the earnings verification section. And this is where the higher math comes into play. So we have our regular earnings plus holiday pay, if applicable, is going to combine to equal the gross amount earned. All right? And what we're talking about specifically is this week. So Sherry only worked a portion of that week, so she did not earn a full $400. So what I can use to help calculate this is this hyperlink here. So when Sherry clicks that hyperlink at approximately $10 per hour, enter the number of hours that were worked for that week beginning on Sunday. So she works usually during the week, 4 days a week, 8-hour shifts. That's how she comes out with her 32 hours a week. So Monday, she was able to work 8 hours. Tuesday, she worked 8 hours. Notice how the system is calculating her earnings as we enter those. However, on Wednesday, when she came in, she was basically told to leave. It was a bad, bad day. So it was just those 2 days of her normal 4-day work week for which she earned wages. So when she clicks the OK button, the system is going to bring the information here into the field. So good thing for Marie, she doesn't have to figure out with pen and paper what those earnings were. Now to complement that, she's also going to use this list here to indicate those days that she worked. So in my example, she would choose Monday and Tuesday, April 13th and 14th. 15th, she did not work, even though she was prepared to work. Okay? So another important reminder, sandwiched in between those two sections, you have to report any earnings, even if it may seem insignificant. And once that's completed, she's going to click the Save button to save the data entry. Okay, so now we come to the confirmation section. Marie is being asked to please review the employers that are listed below in this table and essentially confirm that the employers that are listed, you did in fact receive earnings from them. And again, the week in question is starting on the 12th and ending on the 18th. So if she indicates, oh, wait a minute, I made a mistake, she can go inside and she can edit those data. But for now, I'm happy with that. That's the way I wanted it to be. So the follow-up to that is here under the Additional Employers with Earnings section. Marie, are there any other employers that you worked for, either in a full or part-time capacity, or earned wages from during that same week beginning April 12th and ending April 18th? If yes, then conditionally she'll have additional data entry. No, which is Marie's scenario, she will not have to provide additional earnings data entry. And I'm going to go ahead and click Next. We're almost done. We're at the certification part of the process here. So here is where I am looking at summary information. So based on the responses that I previously entered, here is a summary of the major disaster information that's contributing to my unemployment. There's nothing that I want to change, but I can if I indicate at this step, oh, wait, that's not what I meant to select. I got to go in and make that change. You actually can do that if you want or need to. Similarly, with the next section here called Summary of Eligibility Review Answers, these are all the yes and no responses that I previously entered. So it's a last chance opportunity to review and check my homework and then make any changes if I detect a mistake. Okay, so this is the table that I have referenced, I don't know, maybe 2 times now. Okay, job search will be required after the governor declares all clear. I guess prior to that call, work searches are deferred. Following the governor's call, it's back open to business again. Minimum 3 work search efforts per week. Additionally, we're looking at a summary of job offers refused. I did not refuse any. Summary of earnings. That's the $160 for the 2 days of the week that I did work. Like we've seen before, it's kind of like a final acknowledgement or attestation that yes, I am Marie Callender. I am the person listed on this PUA claim. I don't want to go to jail. So I promise I'm offering the truth. So they're going to click Next. Alrighty, so here, what to expect next. The weekly claim certification is filed, and you, Marie Callender, are eligible for a payment of $335. So at this time, and this is the final line now that I'm reading here, If you would like to file another weekly certification right here and now, because look, we have all these weeks to make up for, they can retroactively submit weekly certifications to make up for those lost weeks that had not been reported. So that is tremendous for the folks, okay? So what they can do if they want is, yes, I would like to continue, and essentially they would repeat the entire process again for the weekly certification procedures. Same data entry, same prompts, same scenario. So I will not do that. I won't take up your time. Or if they say, I need to take a time out, I gotta take the dog for a walk or whatever it is they need to do, they can stop and they can come back to it at a later time.